Hello, everyone. Um, okay, so I'm just going to make sure I'm not on mute. The first annual general meeting of the Nova Scotia College of Medical Imaging and Radiation Therapy Professionals is now called to order. We'll say 11:01. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and the Passamaquoddy peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1726. These treaties recognized the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet title and established rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. Good morning. I'm Chrissy Gamache, the NSC MIRTP Chair, and I would like to welcome you all to the first AGM of the college. Once again, due to COVID-19 protocols, we are conducting this AGM via live stream, but registrants will be able to take part in the meeting through the question and voting functions of this GoToWebinar platform. Thank you for having chosen to participate in this very important part of our governance. We've allocated 1 hour for this year's AGM, and we have structured the meeting to be as efficient as possible. I ask that you keep your comments and questions concise, professional, and relevant to the subject being discussed. After the close of our AGM, we'll open up the floor to an open question-answer period for any and all additional questions. You will notice that you have all been muted by the organizer, and only the panelists have webcam abilities. Participants wishing to submit a question may do so by typing it into the question box to the right of your screen. Please make sure your last name appears at the beginning of your question. We recommend pre-typing your questions into a Word file and then copying and pasting them into the question window just to avoid time delays. If you do have a long question that you were unable to pre-type, you may type in and submit incoming. That way we know to pause for your full question. Finally, please note that we will not be using the raise hand function during this meeting, so it will not be monitored. Should the live broadcast terminate for any reason, participants should close their browser and restart the broadcast using the same link that you used initially. This is also the first step if you have any issues with your audio or with the polling questions. Today's webinar will also be recorded and made available through our fancy YouTube channel for the registrants that were unable to attend today. Okay. Before moving on with the business meeting, I'd like to introduce you to the NSC MIRTP Board of Directors. Myself, Chrissy Gamache, Chair, Rebecca Jessam, Vice Chair, Diana Shepard, Treasurer, Nancy Duggan, Secretary, Jennifer Kresselbuck, Member at Large, Kenny Zan, Member at Large, as well as our public members, Anne Mann, Hamad Mohiyuddin, and Nick Burke. I'd also like to introduce our college staff, Julie Avery, our Executive Director and Registrar, Joanne Jones, our admin staff, who was acting as our moderator today. And our parliamentarian today will be the gracious Trish Monroe. And also present today for our meeting is Ryan Baxter from McGinnis Cooper, who is our legal representative today. And in addition, as this is the first year that we've gone through a full financial audit versus just a review, we will also have Kathleen Mitchell from MMP joining us to present the audited financial statements. So welcome to you all, and thank you so much for joining us. I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution of past presidents of the NSAMRT and the NSSDMS. So I'd like to acknowledge Megan Bryden, Karen Fader, Bert Langell, Aaron Lushman, Jennifer Kresselbuck, Crystal Hilton, and Trish Monroe. Thank you for joining us. If I've missed any past president from either organization, please let us know through the question box so you can be recognized. Last but not least, I recognize the valuable contributions of our many NSC MIRTP volunteers who work on many committees and various work groups, and without whom we would not be able to accomplish our initiatives. So thank you. Joanne, are there any additional past presidents to recognize?
No, there's no questions come through. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. We'll be using a polling app today to vote on motions during this AGM. We did one already if you were part of the education session earlier. We do have a test question to get us started. Joanne, can you please make the first poll live? Everyone please answer the question and hit submit when it appears on your screen. This is a good time for a reminder that only active NSC MIRTP registrants can vote, and unfortunately this does not include our student members. And also a reminder that panelists are unable to use the poll as well. So please just type your answer into the chat box so that your vote can be counted. Yeah, and we'll just wait a few minutes to give the poll some time.
Okay, so we've got 75% voted so far, so I don't know if anyone's having issues.
Perfect. That sounds good. It's a good start. Some of us may be attending today's meeting in a group. If you are attending today's AGM as part of a group, meaning that there are 2 or more of you watching on a single login, please delegate a scrutineer for your group now. And can that identified person please go ahead and type their full name into the question box, as well as the total number of voting college registrants that are present in your group. And we will pause for that to see if there are any groups joining us today. Any groups coming through, Joanne?
No, nothing yet. I've got 84% voted.
Perfect. Okay, it's looking like there might not be.
Hold on.
Are there any groups?
I'm just going to close the poll. No, there's no groups.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to skip the section on what these groups, some instructions for them. All right, next up, we now need to confirm quorum of registrants. So Joanne, can you please make the next poll live? Also, this is a good reminder that if you are having trouble voting in the poll, sometimes it's because it's just in full screen. So just hit escape and try and exit out of full screen mode, and maybe that will help you be able to vote. How are we doing on this poll, Joanne?
Okay, so I'm going to close the poll in 10 seconds. Okay, the poll is closed and we have quorum.
Beautiful, perfect. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I see myself that we have like a little over 95 people joining us today, so that's amazing. All right, the contents of the annual report were posted to the NSC MIRTP website on May 5th. This report can also be found in the handout section, which is near the question box to the right of your screen. The annual report provides all the reference material that you need for this meeting, and hopefully you guys had a chance to review it because it's pretty long. Let's begin with the agenda, which is located on page 3 of the annual report. Is there a mover to accept the agenda for the first annual general meeting?
Yep, my name's Ken, and I move to accept the agenda.
Perfect.
My name is Jennifer Kasbuch, and I second.
Awesome, thank you. It is moved and seconded to approve the agenda of the first annual general meeting of the NSC MIRTP. Are there any corrections to the agenda? If so, please submit any corrections or additions via the question function. And we will pause again while people have a chance to type into that question box. Also, if you have a question that you know is coming up or that you can think of right now, you can go ahead and type it into the question box like at any time during the AGM, and a moderator will collate them, I guess is a good word. Yeah. I don't know if you guys attended the CAMRT meeting, but that chair gave told a bunch of dad jokes in between all this voting pausing. I don't have any dad jokes, but that was pretty entertaining. Any questions coming through, Joanne?
No questions.
Beautiful. All right, the question is to approve the agenda for the first annual general meeting. Joanne, can you please launch the next voting poll? Everyone, please vote once it appears on your screen. Remember, if you're having trouble voting, just hit escape to get out of full screen mode. Or just log out, log in.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 10 seconds. The poll is closed and it's approved.
Perfect, motion passed. All right, 3.0. Is there a mover to accept the minutes of the 80th NSAMRT 8th Annual General Meeting?
Yes, this is Megan, and I move to accept the minutes.
Excellent. Is there a seconder?
Jennifer Casbuch, and I second.
Perfect. Thank you. It is moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the 80th Annual General Meeting. Are there any corrections to these minutes? If so, please submit them via the question function on the right-hand side of your screen. All right. Any questions coming through to it?
No questions.
Perfect. I feel like we'll move on with the vote, and then while we wait for that, if there's any questions for this, then we can go and address them while we're waiting for the voting also. So the question is to approve the minutes of the 80th Annual General Meeting. So Joanne, can you please launch that next voting poll? I'm going to get good at using this app, that's for sure.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 10 seconds. The poll is closed and it's passed.
Perfect. Motion passed. 4.0, business arising. Is there any discussion of business arising from the minutes of last year's meeting? If so, please submit those questions for discussion into the question box. Anything coming through?
No, it's all quiet.
Amazing. All right, so now I will invite Julie Avery, our Executive Director and Registrar, to provide a brief report on the past year and provide a glimpse of what you can expect this coming year. Julie?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for attending the meeting. I just wanted to do a brief overview of this year and maybe talk a little bit about what's upcoming for next year. As you know, we have a strategic plan that was developed 2 years ago with 5 pillars to it. These are the 5 pillars, and I'd just like to speak a little bit to each of these pillars and highlight some of the things that were done in each of the pillars over 2020. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what's going on in 2021 related to these pillars as well. First, we're going to look at governance for long-term viability. Over the last year, the college has actually looked at developing board skills matrix and board assessment and education as an area to ensure that the board itself has the tools that are required to govern the organization in a responsible manner. Some of those, again, will be revisited now that proclamation has occurred to update the language and around what our mandate currently is. However, the board this year definitely, each board member, when they begin their term, has to fill out a board skills matrix. This is in hopes of utilizing it in the future to help in selecting board members for the different roles that they may take on, and also when we do board elections to be able to outline maybe the specific skill sets that we're looking for in candidates. The board also does a self-assessment on what is working well and what needs to be improved in board meetings. We've also provide education each year on governance training for the board and any other areas that they deem they would like to see some education. MNP did an audit this year, so that was a large change for us in 2020. Up till this point, we've always done reviews. With reviews, they come in and they look at your policies and they check to see that they're sound and everything, but they don't actually go in and test everything. With an audit, they come in and they test all your systems to see if those systems are working according to policy, to see that policies are actually being followed. And so it's a much more thorough process. And they're also going to be doing a non-for-profit organization return for us, information return, which we have never filed tax returns to this point in time. So this will be something new for 2020 that we're doing as well. And this will add, obviously, an increased level of transparency and accountability around our financials. The website and the registration platform, again, in 2020, the website was brand new and the registration platform has gone through multiple updates to align with the college language and to recognize that stenographers are now part of our registrant pool. Moving forward for 2021, the strategic plan has been recognized to really focus on what our mandate was as NSMRT and also our focus towards proclamation. As we no longer have a dual mandate and proclamation has occurred, the board has opted to look at actually redoing the strategic plan. The plan that initially had to actually plan to occur about a month and a half ago, but with COVID restrictions, that was not possible. So now the hope is that we will be able to get together over the summer as a board to develop a new strategic plan. Board committee education was another area that we wanted to do higher level focus on. So in 2020, we have already done a full day session of education with the board and also with the credentials committee as well, especially given the new act and regulations that we serve under, to make sure that the board and the credentials committee were aware of their responsibilities. The other thing we're working on is developing a nominations process. So having better policies and processes in place that address the nomination of board members, and also to look at moving towards a board that the elections will still hold for the registrant members, but that also takes into consideration competency. So there's some competency requirements as well in that equation as to who becomes a board member. Looking at registrant engagement, we can see that in 2020, the college NSMRT at the time held a spring education and AGM. They also did became a college by the fall, and we did a fall education in town hall, and we did also held an Atlantic conference in conjunction with the other 3 Atlantic provinces. So all of these were done to give a chance to give some education to registrants, but also give a chance to registrants to have with the AGM and the town hall to communicate directly with the board themselves. And if moving forward, we're going to see some of the focus of that change when we look at what type of education will be given, and exactly how much will given will be partially based on the mandate having now to be public focused rather than registrant focused. So while education, there may be still some education being offered, it will be with that lens in mind. We will also continue to try to engage registrants through the newsletter and survey tools that we have to ensure that registrants are aware of their the responsibilities, and also for them to give us feedback on where we can improve our communication and issues such as that. When we look at proactive partnering, in 2020, the college actually developed a memorandum of understanding with CMRT, and that is covering the registration process, the exams, and international assessments. We also still partner with them to allow registrants as an access to PLI for registrants. The School of Health Sciences, we developed lectures for both the first years and the third years to help them become aware of what it means to be a self-regulated professional group. And we work with the School of Health Sciences in streamlining registration process for new grads, etc. The Department of Health and Wellness, we were working very closely with throughout last year around proclamation and workforce planning, and also around some COVID implications to COVID and regulators, how we streamline some registration processes, and that's to allow to sustain workforce planning during COVID. We worked with private clinics, even though private clinics at the time weren't under our jurisdiction last spring, but we still worked with them with the reopening plans to be an assistance and a resource to them. Moving forward in 2021, we're actually in the process of developing a jurisprudence module, and we're doing that in conjunction with NBAMRT, which is the regulator for New Brunswick. This will help reduce costs of the program that is expected to run somewhere in the ballpark of $30,000 to produce. But with that partnership, we were able to reduce the costs. In addition, we've actually been able to apply and been successful receiving grant money to cover actually our portion of it. We're partnering right now with Sonography Canada and in the works of developing an MOU with them to cover registration processes and international assessments, and also looking at how to streamline CPD for sonographers so that they're only having to report it once. We worked with the Fair Registration Practices, so we're partnering with them, and it's through them that we're actually getting funding for both the jurisprudence module and the updating of our refresher programs. And again, we're partnered now with private clinics with this third wave of COVID. We've been partnering with them to make ensure that their opening plans are meeting Department of Health and Wellness guidelines, as they now do fall under our jurisdiction. When we look at promotion, as NSMRT, we had a dual role. So we did actually do promotional work last year. We released a video. There was a CBC interview that was done. And we also did, in the background, do some work on PPE and pay. However, moving forward, the messaging from the college would definitely be around the best interest of the public. So we won't be doing direct advocacy of MRTs in the future. It's not to say that we will not be building awareness of the profession. It will just be done with the lens of educating the public. And looking at the last pillar is college integration, and that is after proclamation, moving forward and integrating all our processes into the requirements for a college. We've done a lot. We've done the registration process and requirements, the website language both on the website and the registration platform. Language update and branding has been completed to the best of our knowledge. We are at that stage where things can get missed because it's amazing how many places NSMRT actually shows up in. So I would ask registrants now, going forward, if you do see any residual NSMRT branding, to bring it to our attention so that we can address that, or language that is not appropriate for the college. We've launched the CPD program that is a new requirement, and we've updated our committee structures and policies, and the board has reviewed and accepted those policies as college policies. Moving forward, we're still looking at some places where name changing is required with certain vendors and platforms that we're using, because you can't do it all at once. Some name changes have to happen before other name changes, so it's a little bit of an arduous process. In 2021, we had our new inaugural board in, and you'll be ratifying that vote today. And as we were saying, for college integration, another area is that we will have a jurisprudence module as an additional education component for registrants that will become available hopefully by the end of 2021. If not, then it will be in early 2022. For staffing, there hasn't been a large change in staffing. In 2020, the 3 positions were myself as Executive Director Registrar, Joanne as the Administrative Assistant, and we had a summer student. My position as Executive Director was 30 hours a week until the date of proclamation. On that date, the board asked me to begin working immediately 40 hours a week, so I have been doing that since that point in time. The Administrative Assistant has remained at 15 hours a week, so there's been no change there. And the summer student is through a grant program, so about 70% of their salary is actually covered by a grant that we apply for. In addition, there was a national grant that had poor uptake in the summer, and they were reaching out to see if we were interested in utilizing that. So we actually got another grant that allowed the summer student last year to stay on 1 day a week through the winter. This summer, we again will have a new summer student through that grant program as well. That sort of covers the highlights of a few things around our strategic plan. And before I turn it back to Chrissy, I would like to take a chance to thank these volunteers who have recently finished either their terms on our board or have finished their terms on other committees and are no longer volunteering with us. So we just want to thank them all for their efforts and times that they've given to the organization. Without them, much of the operational objectives wouldn't be realized. So I want to thank them very much. And I will turn it back to Chrissy.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. I feel like some of these volunteers have moved on to other projects and other volunteer roles as well. They're not just all off the chart. Okay, 5.0. We're halfway there. Annual reports. So I would definitely like to thank everyone for their hard work in developing their annual reports this year. They look beautiful. Is there a motion to accept all the reports en masse, excluding the financial reports?
This is Henny again, and I move to accept the reports.
Perfect. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, Jennifer Kasbuch, I second the reports.
Excellent. Thank you. It is moved and seconded to accept the reports en masse, excluding the financial reports. Are there any questions on the co-president's or the executive director's report? If so, please type them in the question box. And while we wait for that, I'll also ask if there are any questions on the remaining reports, excluding the financial reports. So that will be pages 18 to 41, looks like.
No questions come through on those reports.
Okay, perfect. I'll probably move on, but please, Joanne, feel free to interrupt me if any questions come through. All right, 5.3, the finances. So is there a mover to approve the audited financial statements for 2020?
This is Gary, and I move to accept those reports.
And this is Jennifer. I second that.
Perfect, thank you. It is moved and seconded to approve the audited financial statements for 2020. No questions on the reports yet, Joanne?
No questions on the reports. We need to launch the poll to accept the reports en masse, excluding the financial reports.
Sure.
So I'll do that now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, the poll will close in 10 seconds. Poll is closed and it's passed. Motion is passed.
Perfect, thank you. Motion carried. Okay, now back to the finances. So it is moved and seconded already to approve the audited financial statements. Are there any questions on these audited financial statements, which are page 24 to 34 in the annual report? And while we pause for questions, I'd like to invite Kathleen Mitchell from MNP to present on the audited financial statements. Kathleen?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So my name is Kathleen Mitchell. I'm a senior manager with MNP. I'm happy to be participating this morning to go over your annual financial results. So as Julie mentioned, this was the first year for an audit engagement. So as auditors, our responsibility is to audit the financial statements in accordance with Canadian audit standards, while management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of those statements. The board is responsible for overseeing the college's financial reporting process. So this year we've issued a clean audit report on your financials, which means we provide reasonable assurance that your financials are free from material misstatement. So I will provide some insight just at a high level into each of your financial statements below, and just comment any questions as we're going through. So the first statement showing there, the statement of revenues and expenses. Keep in mind, this is for the 10 months ended December 31st, 2020, due to the combination of the legacy organizations and moving the year end to December from a previous year end of February. The registration fees were higher than budgeted due to approximately 20 plus new members in the current year. You'll notice there that the budget line item for other income was about 33K, and we've got $2,000 showing there. The budget included the annual conference, which this year was held virtually. So you can see just on the line above that brought in about $8,400 this year. So overall, with the increase in fees offset by the decrease in other income, we're coming to overall revenue, which is in line with budget. Moving down, operating expenses were approximately $10K lower than what was budgeted. And that's mainly due to $20,000 was budgeted for special projects. $14,000 of that was actually spent on the enhancement of the registration platform, which has been capitalized. So you don't see it on this statement, but it was in fact spent as part of the budget. So this, I guess, variance from the budget is offset by having higher professional fees than were originally budgeted, which is mainly due to the formation of the college. But again, these variances are offsetting, coming down to an overall excess of revenues over expenses, which is in line with the budget around $59,000. And then the organization earned another $9K in investment income. So moving on to the balance sheet. So this balance sheet reflects the college's financial position at a point in time. So the first column is your December 31st, 2020 year end. And the second column is February 28th, 2020, which was the year end for NSAMRT, the legacy organization. So total assets have increased 162K, which is mainly due to earnings from operations of 143K and the investment in the registration platform of 14K. In addition, the investments earned about $9,000 during the year. So the total value of investments at year end was 287K. 103,000 of that is included as cash, and the rest are in fixed income bonds and mutual funds. Moving a little further on down, accounts payable and accrued liabilities increased about 24K for amounts owing for the Guild software and the annual audit. Deferred revenue has increased. This balance represents the registration fees that are collected in advance of the next fiscal year. And then overall net assets have increased from the prior year as a result of the excess of revenues over expenses. The excess is then allocated to each of the net assets there, not to exceed the maximums that were set out by the board of directors for each of those funds. So because each of the operational reserve, special reserve, and contingency fund have hit their maximums, there's 67K in the operating fund. Okay, and we'll move down. So this is the statement of cash flows. So we talked about this a little bit above, but basically cash has decreased 56K during the year. 143 came in from operations, but then cash was used to purchase about 178K in long-term investments and invest in that Guild software platform of 22,000. So I'll get you just to move to the next page. We have the statement of changes in net assets. So this is where you can clearly see sort of the opening fund balances for each of these funds, how the excess of revenue over expenses has been allocated with these fund transfers in order to bring the ending fund balances up to each of their maximums, and the remainder remains in operating. And I think we can move to the next one. So this is just a more detailed breakdown of the budget that we discussed above. So that was all I had on the financial reports. I'll just call for any questions for me on those reports at this time.
Okay, I have a question from Rogers. Can you speak to how the investments were chosen and any ethical considerations that were taken?
I feel like that's a question that maybe Julie can answer.
Yeah, I can tell you that what happened was a year and a half ago, we realized we had a substantial amount of cash sitting in our bank accounts doing nothing. And actually the bank also brought it to our our attention that really we probably should be doing something with that money to make it work for us. So at that point, the board agreed that we should start looking at developing an investment policy, because you can't do that without that first. So we then asked for investment person to come in and speak with the board and speak with the finance committee. We developed a policy based off of policies from other non-for-profit organizations to make sure that investments were put in low to medium low risk, and that we always kept enough liquid assets that it would be accessible if need be on an emergency basis. The matter of fact, as Kathleen sort of pointed out, 100,000 of that 280,000 is such a liquid form, it's actually considered cash at this point in time. The other thing we did was we did a survey of our bank accounts over 5 years to figure out what the minimum amount is that we ever carried over those 5 years, to ensure that we didn't invest more money than what that would leave us cash poor. And we also, when we determined what that value was, we actually then built a buffer into it as well, in case there were some extreme expenses going on. So with all that, then we approached an investment firm to actually do the investments and handle the investments. So they have a very strict, detailed policy that they need to follow for investments.
Are there any other questions on the financials?
No, nothing else has come through.
Okay, so before I leave, I'd just like to say thank you to Julie for her cooperation during the audit. Moving from a review engagement to an audit, especially during the year of a lot of change, is not an easy task, but it went very smoothly. So congratulations to you all on what you've accomplished over the past year. Thanks again for having me this morning. Enjoy the rest of your AGM, and I hope you all have a great weekend.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kathleen. I appreciate it.
Welcome. See you later.
See you. All right, still no more questions on the financial statements, Joanne?
No.
Beautiful. All right, the question is to approve the audited financial statements for 2020. Can you please launch that next voting poll? And always remember that any questions that you can think of later or anything, we accept them anytime, anywhere from the info line. So please don't hesitate to shoot us an email with any of your questions regarding any of this or otherwise.
The poll will close in 10 seconds. Okay, the poll is closed and approved.
Perfect. Motion carried. Next up, 6.1. Is there a mover to ratify the election of Chrissy Gamache, Rebecca Jessam, Diana Shepherd, Nancy Duggan, Kenny Zan, and Jennifer Kresselbuck to the NSC MIRTP Board of Directors?
Hi, this is Hamad Mohiuddin. I move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Hi, Anne. Are you able to second that motion? Because the other board members are on it, so we'd rather they not be seconders on it.
I so move that to second the motion.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. It is moved and seconded to ratify the election of Chrissy Gamache, Rebecca Jessam, Diana Shepherd, Nancy Duggan, Kenny Zan, and Jennifer Kresselbuck to the NSC MIRTP Board of Directors. Before I open the floor to debate on this motion, I just want to point out that although Anne Mann, Nick Burke, and Hamad Mohiuddin Our directors of the board, they are public members which are appointed by the government. So therefore, they're not elected and not part of this ratification motion. Is there any debate on this motion? If so, please just type your questions into the question box. Okay, so we voted back in December, I believe, and so these directors have been in place since February 1st.
There are no questions.
Perfect. All right, so the question is to ratify the election of Chrissy, Rebecca, Diana, Nancy, Kenny, and Jen to the board of directors for the college. Joanne, can you now please launch the voting poll? One vote. The poll appears on your screen.
The poll will close in 10 seconds. Poll is closed and the motion is passed.
Awesome. All right, motion carried. 6.2, appointment of accounting firm for financial audit. The NSC MIRTP board is recommending the appointment of the firm MNP again to perform the financial audit for the 2021 financial year, or fiscal year, sorry. Is there a mover to appoint the firm of MNP as the financial auditors for the 2021 fiscal year?
This is Kenny. I will move to appoint MLB as the financial reviewers.
Excellent. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, Jennifer, I will second this motion.
Awesome, thank you. It is moved and seconded to appoint the firm of MNP as the financial auditors for the 2021 fiscal year. Is there any debate? All right, I think we'll move into the poll. So the question is to appoint the firm of MNP as the financial auditors for the 2021 fiscal year. Joanne, please go ahead and launch that voting poll, and everyone please vote. I feel like we're doing so well at the voting. No issues.
Okay, the poll will close in 10 seconds. The poll is closed and the motion is passed.
Perfect, motion carried. All right, 8.1. I'd now like to introduce you to the inaugural NSC MIRTP Board of Directors for 2021. Rebecca Jessam, Vice Chair, Diana Shepard, Treasurer, Nancy Duggan, Secretary, and our members at large, Kenny Zan, Jennifer Krestbuck, Ann Mann, Nick Burke, and Hamad Mohiuddin, and myself, Chrissy Gamache, as Chair. Thank you all for attending and for your participation. I'd like to thank everyone for their assistance today. And Joanne, if there's no more further questions or comments coming through that little box.
Now I've got 2 questions.
Perfect, give her.
Okay, Rogers, with the elimination of education support for education/support for members under the college, as well as the significant increase in membership dues to the college, when should we expect a reduction of dues?
I feel like we would normally move this to after the AGM, but I can answer that. The dues rate was decided as a long-term rate, including the sonographers, like with the sonographers in mind. So there's no plan to reduce the dues date. It's the budget for a college is much larger than an association.
Sorry, my fault. I jumped ahead with questions. I've got some more, but I'll leave it to the end.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I declare this first annual general meeting of the Nova Scotia College of Medical Imaging and Radiation Therapy Professionals closed. And like 9 minutes to spare, that's amazing. Okay, now we'll move into the next portion of today's webinar. That is an open question and answer period. Brian Baxter will be staying with us for this portion of the meeting to address any legal questions individuals may have. And for those just joining this portion of our meeting, I would like to review how questions will be asked and addressed during this session. Due to the number of individuals online, all mics have been muted except for those of the board and legal. If you have a question, please make sure your last name appears at the beginning of your question. If it's a long question, please type in incoming and submit so that we know to wait for your full question. If you reach the max allowed characters, you can just type ... and we'll know that there's more coming. And then when you're finished, just type end so we know that it is ready to be read. The total time required to read the question must not exceed 3 minutes. We recommend pre-typing these long questions into a Word file and then pasting them so we can avoid any time delays. And questions may not be answered in the order in which they've been received, and identical questions may be grouped together by the moderator. And lastly, please note we will not be using the raise hand function during this meeting, so just type your stuff into the question box. Questions will be read aloud and will be answered by a board member, the executive director, or committee chair as appropriate. And we encourage individuals to bring forth any questions or concerns that they have and are reminded to phrase it in a concise, professional manner. Questions containing profanity or personal attacks or otherwise unprofessional will not be addressed. The minutes of this AGM and a transcript of this Q&A forum will also be posted on the website within 30 days for those that weren't able to attend. All right, Joanne, now please go ahead with the questions.
Okay, Rogers, can we have more details published on professional practice complaints? Transparency should be main component of our process. While privacy should be respected, of course, I believe it would be useful for membership to have a clear view of the processes.
I can let Julie answer that one.
Yes, so what we do actually in our annual report lists the numbers and the type of complaint, whether it's related to communication, sexual nature, professional misconduct. So those are actually listed currently. As far as giving more detail about the exact complaint, unless it goes to a full panel hearing, we're subject to privacy laws that don't allow that. If it actually goes to a full panel hearing, then that hearing is actually open to the public, and the findings of that hearing would be posted to the website, the actual website. The vast majority of complaints are resolved informally and don't actually go to a hearing panel. So therefore, they stay as an informal agreement. And that agreement, the level of what is shared is part of that agreement. So depending on what the need is to, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the public's protected by that agreement, whatever it is. As far as process is concerned, I would agree that we need to get, we're still working on developing more process documents so that it's an easy thing to follow, and it's something that we plan on actually building on our website more. There is some information right now on complaints on the website for some common questions of what would happen in a complaint situation. But typically what happens is a complaint is filed. That complaint can be filed by anybody. It can be a registrant who files it. It can be a public member, a member of the public. It can be the registrar, myself, who files it. And once it's filed, the complaint, whoever the complaint is against, is notified so that they're given a chance to respond. And then depending on what the complaint is, it may be dismissed right up front if it's found to, well, first when the complaint comes in before even the person's notified, if the complaint is deemed not to be within our jurisdiction, then you let that person know that that complaint can't go forward because we don't have jurisdiction, or it would, if it is going forward, the person the complaint's about would be notified and given a chance to respond to it. Depending on the nature of the complaint and what it is, the registrar may resolve it informally without even going to a full investigation, or it may go to an investigation. If it goes to an investigation, a third-party person is hired by the college to do an investigation. They write a report. It would go to the investigation committee to review it, and then the investigation committee can make a recommendation such as dismissing. They can make a recommendation to have an informal resolution of the complaint, or they can recommend that it actually goes to a full panel hearing. And it can be a lengthy process to do this. I don't know, Ryan, do you want to speak any more to that?
Morning, everyone. Pleased to be with folks this morning. I think that's a perfect answer, Julie. The only thing that I would really add is that at the investigation stage, there are no findings. The information or the evidence that's put before the investigation committee, it's not tested, it's not subject to cross-examination, so there's no facts that are being determined at that first level stage investigation. So unless a member consents to discipline at that initial stage, there cannot be any publication because it would be extremely prejudicial against a member. However, as Julie notes, if the member agrees to publication or if it's referred to a hearing, then it would attract publication. I will say that the college's process in this regard is consistent with all of the other health regulators in Nova Scotia. Increasingly, there has been more and more transparency with respect to complaints. So where we are today is significantly more transparent than we were, even 5-10 years ago. So it is always an area for development, and the college's practice of giving anonymous kind of highlights of the matters that they've received, I think is helpful too, without providing, of course, the registrant's name or any other publicly identifying information.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, yeah, there is a summary stuff that's come through this year in 2020 in our annual report.
Yeah, and I just want to add one other thing. It is difficult in a larger college. If you have like 14,000 people, you have obviously a higher number of complaints, and it's a little easier to give a little bit more detail without risking privacy concerns. It becomes very difficult in our situation when, for example, there's only 50-something MRI techs, and you have to be very careful about the level of detail you can give, because even if nothing specifically identifies, when you use the totality of the information, sometimes it can. So we have to be really careful on what we share.
Perfect. All right.
Okay, a question from Jameson. With significant funds available for investment, could this not provide opportunity for fee reduction?
The monies that are invested are from our reserve fund, so they are already like in accounts just sitting there in case we need them for special projects or operation funds and stuff like that. So no, that money is allocated, and for like complaints and stuff like that, that's what that money is for, but it's just sitting in a bank account for those purposes. So while it's sitting there, we just have it invested, so it's working for us. But no, that will not lower the dues rate.
Okay, a question from Collier. What is the college's position on imaging professionals performing out-of-scope duties as part of their employment?
I feel like this is another one for the registrar, Julie, sorry. Can you read the question one more time, Joanne?
Yeah. What is the college's position on imaging professionals performing out-of-scope duties as part of their employment?
Without a specific example, it's a sort of a, I'm going to assume you're talking about doing something that's not within an individual scope of practice. If it's not within your individual scope of practice, you shouldn't be doing it, even if it's in the broader scope of practice. So if you're radiological technologist, and it's within the radiological technologist broader scope of practice, but not a skill set you have, it's incumbent upon you to attain that skill set in a responsible manner before taking part in providing that type of care to the public.
Sorry, it's for MRT performing ECGs.
ECGs are part of the ECGs are part of within your scope. So if it's not within your individual scope, you need to get that to seek the skill set to make that part of your individual scope, but it is part of the broader scope.
Yeah, if it's part of like your institution's policy or like, then you just have to work with your employer to gain the proper training and competence so that it is part of your scope of practice.
Yeah. So if they want you to do that and you don't feel comfortable doing that, you should work with your employer to figure out some type of education training plan so that you can come up to the level of feeling comfortable performing them.
I hope that answers your question.
Okay, next question from Rogers. As a follow-up to my question on dues, how much money does the college need?
Well, our budget is posted. It's like we're not for profit, so we're not trying to make money, but it balances out. So we have like the money's a lot allocated for lots of things that are listed in the budget there. But
so I can make a comment to that as well. In looking at those budgets, or even those documents, for example, today it showed $700,000 of assets, remembering that $330,000 of those assets are actually the operational funds for this year. So it leaves us around $400,000 that we have. And when we actually, MNP, we reviewed our finances, one of the recommendations they have made that we have not yet addressed this year is the fact that they feel that our reserve funds are inadequate currently, and that we need to be, and the finance committee is reviewing this for this year, and they feel that for operational fund, basically that is a fund that if we were ever had to shut down shop, that we were able to do that without any additional incoming money from registrants. So the assumption there would be that we have no dues coming in, but we have responsibilities that we need to fulfill before we actually cease to exist as an entity. And they say typically that costs anywhere from 50% to 100% of an annual operation budget. So they're saying our current 40,000 a year, 40,000 in that fund is not adequate to address that need. So they're asking that we increase that. They're also stating that for the contingency fund, which is what would handle any, that's where the money is covered from complaints and hearings. And they said that while you hope it never happens, if you got 2 bad complaints that went to panel in a year, you would be in jeopardy. So of not being able to cover costs. So they're again suggesting that we review our contingency fund and maybe take a look at what other regulators have for their complaints and contingency funds and mirror that a little more closely. So the other thing that we have going on this year is we had a surplus, and quite substantial, but that was for 2 reasons. One was because due to COVID, there was no travel. A lot of meetings didn't happen, and some initiatives got put on the back burner. So those costs didn't happen. And the other reason we had a surplus would be because NSSDMS's, all their assets came to us. So that was approximately $35,000. So when you actually look and you take those into account, there really wasn't much of a surplus there at all. Right now, our budget really covers year-to-year expenses and not much more.
Okay, question from Dingwall. Regarding Roger's question about transparency in the complaints procedure, is there any thought about how to address change fatigue amongst the membership? I can imagine that people might be concerned about the nature of complaints that might be brought against them in this new environment.
I'm not like how will the college address the change fatigue among its members or registrants? I feel like we don't have a lot of like MRT focused ability. That would be something that hopefully passionate MR-ITPs would take on among their institutions and do like lunch and learns or support groups or that kind of stuff. Yeah, the college is focused on public safety, and we're able to do like some education like earlier today, that kind of stuff, but I'm not too sure what the exact question is. But yeah, unfortunately, we're not an association anymore, so we're not MR-ITP focused.
Okay, next question from McLennan. Apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Is there a possibility of fee reduction in the future if income continues to outstrip expenses? For example, if the reserve fund hits the maximum threshold?
Sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
Is there a possibility of fee reduction in the future if income continues to outstrip expenses? For example, if the reserve fund hits the maximum threshold?
I don't think I can speak to future decisions of the board around dues rates at this time. We can only go budget by budget, year by year. But yeah, I'm not able to speak at that at this time. There's no plans to increase or decrease the dues budget. That's what I'll say today.
Okay, this is a follow-up question for Collier. CMRT isn't covering us for performing out-of-scope duties, so it appears we are without liability insurance for these additional duties, or am I incorrect?
That would be a question for CMRT if it's about the CMRT professional liability insurance. But I would definitely say I would start with your employer and your policies. If it's something that you are required to do as part of your job, then I believe.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify that. If you are working outside your scope of practice, so if you're, for example, if you're an ultrasound, if you're a sonographer, just give something outlandish. If you're a sonographer who has no license in X-ray and goes into X-ray one day and starts X-raying somebody, and something happens where a complaint is brought against you, you will not be covered by PLI because you are clearly outside your scope of practice. Your PLI covers your scope. So if you're doing anything within scope of practice, and that's your broader scope. So even if if, for example, the ECG question, someone did an ECG is within the broader scope of practice, and someone did an ECG, but really it wasn't in their individual scope, you would still have PLI coverage. Now, you may be found in an investigation process culpable for your judgment and everything, but you would still be covered because you were working within your scope. But if you were knowingly working outside knowingly doing something that you are not licensed to do, then yes, you are at risk. Because what they will do is the PLI looks to the regulator. So they say, we cover anything that the regulator recognizes as within scope. So as long as there's some clear documentation within the provincial regulator that that's within scope, you're covered. But if you knowingly are operating outside the scope of your license, then that's problematic.
Yeah, I'll just add to that and say that like I definitely feel like this is the one area that is different with the college, is that like the scope of practice is like your scope of practice. Like everyone has like a personal scope of practice. Like I was taught in school, in X-ray school, to like catheterize, but I would not consider that in my personal scope of practice because I would need retraining and more education on that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's where, you know, you can say scope of practice, but it means more than what it used to, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Okay, there are no more questions.
No more questions. Okay.
There was
Okay.
there's one comment in the chat, so I just want to add to it because it doesn't show up, and this is around
just-
dues. Okay, there's been different. Okay, do you want to go ahead and do it then? So, did you see it, Chris?
That's okay. Go for it.
So there was several questions today around dues. What I'll also point out is if you do look at dues across both within Nova Scotia for other health regulated professional groups within Nova Scotia, there's 22 of them. Or if you look at MRT, MIRTP regulators across the country, our dues is actually one of the lower dues. It's definitely within the ballpark of most others, and in many cases it's lower.
And yeah, that was well researched and well thought out back in the day. Yeah. Also, like I kind of thought people would have more questions about like other education or like CRMT Atlantic, but the information has just started to come out from CRMT about the vote on the provincial association services. So I definitely hope that everyone goes to that website and makes an informed vote. It's coming up in the next couple of weeks. It will determine your future as MRTs and your support level.
Chrissy, I know that Rebecca has received quite a few CPD questions. Maybe she should just speak to some common CPD questions.
Sure.
I do have one more question as well, so I can ask that afterwards.
You can go now, Joanne.
Okay. MacDonald, why is the IWK still permitted to hire nurses as ultrasound technologists?
The short answer is it's in their contract. But Julie and Jan, I'm sure you guys have.
It is within the Act, and the regulations. So what happened there was when the Act and regulations were being written, you need to go back to 10 years ago and understand the work environment at that time. There was a desperate shortage for sonographers. IWK was very concerned that if it became that if they were unable to utilize nurses in that capacity, that they truly just would not be able to provide services. And the numbers sort of supported that at the time. And so Department of Health and Wellness also had a concern about it. And so the IWK actually, my understanding was that they were basically, the management of IWK as a stakeholder said they couldn't be supportive of the Act or the regulations moving forward if it jeopardized their ability to provide services. So the outcome of that was that in this small area, there would be this exception made, but the nurses have a limited scope. They have to get their AMRDS, so there are caveats to that. Not any nurse can go in and do sonography. Also, it only holds at IWK. So if any of those nurses move positions to another facility, they cannot continue to practice sonography in those other facilities. It's limited to pediatric echo and pediatric pediatric ectovascular and the high-risk maternity clinic, right? So, yes. Jennifer, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
So I think that was a really good summary, Julie. There have been a lot of concerns definitely surrounding nurses still being hired and things like that. Currently, they were successful. The sonographers that work in fetal assessment at least were successful in really advocating for sonography as a profession and ensuring that the newest hire was a sonographer. I know that there was debate about whether it be a nurse or a sonographer. So we really commend the work of all of the sonographers educating the higher ups and HR and everything like that about the importance of hiring a sonographer. But it definitely goes back to history and potentially not having been able to have an act or a college at all if we would have stood firm on that. So one caveat as well in the act is that after the college became proclaimed, any new hires of nurses have to have their ARDMS, as Julie had mentioned, and they have to be working under the supervision of somebody who practices sonography. So meaning like MFMs who have, so maternal fetal medicine specialists who have extra training in that as well. So it's definitely a hot topic, but it kind of is one of those things where for the greater good, we still wanted to have the college go through with this one exception.
There's a follow-up to that question from MacDonald. Is the public aware of this?
So around protected titles, the nurse sonographers that work in fetal assessment and pediatric echo do have to identify themselves using their RN credentials as well. I don't know specifically how involved besides that the public is. I would assume that as a patient being scanned by a nurse sonographer introducing themselves as such would make them aware of the differentiation, but it could be something that I guess we potentially look into in the future to kind of educate the public about further, for sure.
Okay,
it is in our act. It is written in our act also. So.
Yeah, it's written in the act as well, exactly, that there's an exemption, yeah.
There's another follow-up to that question from Rogers. So will the nurse sonographers be required to be members of our college and subject to our policies?
No, so the registered nurses do, however, have to remain a member of their college. So the nursing college is what I mean by that. And that is because the nurses college will be the ones who handle any complaints and things like that surrounding them. Obviously, I'm sure that if there was ever a complaint about a nurse sonographer, their college would seek counsel with us as well. Thankfully, it hasn't happened before, and hopefully it won't happen. But that's the reasoning behind that, is that they are already a member of a professional college, and that's the college that will be licensing them, because their license is in nursing.
Correct answer. Anything else, Joanne?
No, that's it at the moment.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, no problem. Good question.
Yeah. So, yeah, Rebecca.
One.
Okay.
Sorry. This is from Duran. How can the nurses college ensure the nurse sonographers are actually working within their scope?
I would say that's up to the nurse, just like us. Like, we are responsible to be professional, and yeah.
Yeah, they have their own standards of practice, code of ethics, and they're expected to follow that, right? And standards of care. So if they were ever, if they did something within sonography, if you actually look at our standards of practice and code of ethics, they really don't get into the minutia of you do this for this procedure, you do that for that procedure. It's a higher level than that about professional conduct and expectations. The nursing college would have similar ones, and then what would happen is if a complaint was lodged against a nurse and it involved a care in with a patient with sonography, they would look to what is an expected standard of care that's reasonable within the sonography realm. And in all likelihood, if they didn't know, we sit at a common table with all health regulators in the province. There would be nothing preventing them from having that conversation with us. To ensure they had a proper understanding of what would be expected and what would be reasonable care.
Okay, I've got another question from Rogers. Will the college actively look for unlicensed practitioners or depend on reports?
Like, actively look for unlicensed MIRTPs. We work close. Sorry, go for it as registrar.
Yeah, so we, you know, we have already identified at least 3 or 4 occasions where someone has been practicing without a license. When that is discovered, the employer is contacted immediately, and the person is asked to cease and desist until they rectify the issue. And in most cases, that's not a problem. It's especially with the college first coming in, the college looked at it as more of an education component, because sonographers, some of them were not aware. So we did have a couple of sonographers that weren't aware and did not license by the required dates, and we worked with them and got them licensed. But yes, if we are aware, if for whatever way we come across it, whether it be because someone phones us and lets us know, or because for some other reason comes up that makes us aware that someone's practicing without a license, we actively will look into it. However, it's impossible for us to know every position in the province. I don't have a list of every MIRTP position in the province that I can audit. So is it possible for someone to be working without a license? Yes. If we become aware of it, we act on it.
And also our MIRTP roster on the website is like live. So if we register someone today, they show up on that list. So employers are supposed to be checking that list to make sure that the people that they hire, or the people that renew like every January 1st type thing, that everyone that is working in their department is on that list and they're actively registered. So there's that also.
Yeah, one of the holes in that I find in that system where is the return from a leave. So when an employee is on a leave, long-term disability, parental leave, what have you, I find sometimes when they come back, the employers are not verifying that they have actually renewed their license, because it happens outside the renewal period. The managers are really good at renewal time to check that out, but in the midst of the year, that has happened a few times where someone has returned and they haven't renewed when they returned, and the managers have not checked to make sure they're current.
Okay, I've got a question from McDonald. I'm not understanding why nurses practicing sonography are not required to become a member of MIRTP. Can someone explain?
Like a basic analogy is that we're not regulating the act, we're regulating the professional. So like dentistry can use radiation. That's like a similar example, I guess, if that makes any sense. But I feel like Julie and Ryan, you're going to take over.
I'm gonna let Ryan go with this. Go, Ryan.
I mean, it's an excellent question that's being asked, and I think it's important to know that this was a decision that was made by the provincial government when they were drafting and passing the legislation. So although the college and the association played a very significant role in developing the act, it's ultimately government and our legislators that decide what goes in and what doesn't. And there was significant efforts for this exception in the Act to allow, in very narrow, limited circumstances, for RNs at the IWK to engage in that practice. So it's explicitly in the legislation to recognize, what would have probably been a pretty big service delivery issue, but for having that in there. So although it's in our legislation, that was a decision that was made by the government, by the legislature, in response to a lot of lobbying by the IWK at that time. So it's certainly an exception that is permitted under the legislation. I will say, and I think Julie was hitting on this, there can be overlapping scopes of practice amongst a variety of different professions. So many of the acts in the province do have very narrow exceptions for certain different circumstances, and this is an example of one. They really need to perform and be competent and engage in continuing competency and currency, their regulator has all of those expectations on these RNs, just like your college would. But that's ultimately the reason why it is there. It was a government decision a long time ago, over a decade ago, I'd say.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. Question from Dingwall. Are there any other exceptions to the need for registered practitioners, research, management, information, technology, small facilities, private clinics, etc.?
That's a loaded question.
There is. There is the exception of the 25, what we used to call the 25-bed rule, is called the specific site regulation now. That allows for a site with less than 25 beds to allow another regulated health provider to perform limited scope x-rays. The regulations for that have been written. So within the regulations, it lists sort of what type of procedures are allowed and under what circumstances this other regulated healthcare provider can provide those services. It also outlines that they need to follow the guidelines for what type of knowledge or training program they need to have completed. This is not completed because this has to be done in cooperation with Nova Scotia Health Authority and Nova Scotia, and it's only related to Nova Scotia Health. It doesn't pertain to IWK, but within Nova Scotia Health, they have at this point deemed that they do not want to operationalize that portion of the regulations. It's there for them to operationalize if they wish, but at such point in time that they wish to do that, we would need to develop what that academic clinical skill set would look like before they could allow someone to do it. In addition, whatever group was selected to do it, say it was a nursing group, say, then we would work with the nursing college to have some type of agreement in place that if a complaint came forth related to that limited scope practice in radiography, and it's only for radiography, that we would be part of that complaint process. I think that's the only other big exception in the Act.
Okay, I currently have no more questions.
Okay. Rebecca, are you still interested in doing like one or two of your common CPD questions that you get often?
Sure, I can jump into a little bit of CPD just because we do get a lot of emails about it, especially recently. Two of the big ones, or one of the big ones, is why do some work-intensive activities have low credit values, and explaining that. So I will say that the CPD platform was developed to promote continuing education and development in more than one area. So it's not that we're not recognizing that time-intensive activities like formal courses and publications are a lot of work, because we know that they are. You know, some of these activities take dozens and dozens of hours to complete. But the reason why there is no single activity that awards all of your 30 credits in your cycle is because we wanted to promote kind of more diverse and distinct learning, making it more of a conscious effort to get involved in professional development rather than aiming for a kind of one and done sort of thing with activities. I just wanted to point out that, you know, you can really get as creative as you want when you're doing your credits. For example, if you're doing something like a master's or completing a formal course, it's true you can't claim all of your courses that you take for CPD credits because of the limits that there are for claiming formal courses. But you could think, you know, while you were doing your program, was there a webinar that you attended? Did you do some independent research? Did you read some journal articles? All of those things can still be counted as individual and separate activities. So even though they were part of your program at large, don't be afraid to kind of scrutinize your learning and ask yourself, you know, did I really do more than one type of learning while I was completing this more overarching labor-intensive single activity as a whole? And also speaking to the limits on activities, the limits were posed to promote, again, more of a diverse learning when you're doing your CPD, so that there's no one and done with activities, and just to try to encourage people to get development in more than one area. That being said, the CPD document is a living document, and we are actively collecting feedback on it. But we really want to let the first cycle run its course so that we can do a fair assessment of it. We're definitely opening to change, but we just want to see a complete picture and get all the data in front of us first once the cycle's completed, before we make any major changes. We're not even a year into the cycle yet, and we did already have multiple people submit their CPD, which is a great sign. But that being said, if you are finding you're struggling with your credits, reach out to the college and the info email, and we can assist you with that. And if you fall short on your credits for some reason, then we will work out a plan for you to help meet your target. I think those are the major things. But if anyone thinks of any other questions, you can shoot them to me in email or the info line too.
Perfect.
I might want to make one more note, and that is, don't submit your applications yet. If you got your 30 credits, once you submit, you can't change anything because now you've submitted for review. It's not due until next November, like a year away. So even if you have your 30-some credits, leave it open for now. That way, if down the road you want to add something or change something, you still have that capacity to do so. We've already had a few people who've submitted their applications, but it's not necessary at this point in time.
Awesome. But yeah, and you can find Rebecca Jessum's email address on the website. She is the chair of the credentials committee, so you'll be able to find her via that route. Any other questions, Joanne?
No, there's no more questions.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, please remember, feel free to use the info line. Remember, it's info@nscmirtp now .ca. So yeah, shoot any emails or questions that you have through that email. Seeing that there's nothing else, I think we can close this Q&A forum. I think. Yeah, still nothing, Joanne. I feel like there's going to be someone.
Let's do a countdown. 10 more seconds.
Awesome.
No, there's nothing come through.
Okay, perfect. And yes, and thank you, Ryan, for staying on for this part. That's awesome.
Does Ryan have any closing comments?
No, just thank you for inviting me. This is such an exciting time for your college. You know, your first AGM is the result of, you know, over a decade of very hard work, well before my time becoming involved with the college. So it's just such a lovely accomplishment to be a regulated profession, and the engagement of your membership at this AGM, it's pretty remarkable. I attend a lot of these, and the crowds are typically pretty sparse. So this is a great start, and just congratulations to the entire membership of the college in becoming a esteemed profession in Nova Scotia. There's always growing pains in the beginning, that's invariable, but it's an exciting time to be involved with the regulation of your profession. So thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can we just confirm how people receive the credits for today?
I saw in the newsletter that they were going to reach out to you, Joanne.
Yes. So anyone who was online, that's how they can. And Joanne and I will talk about it, but it may be easier for Joanne just to actually generate a certificate for anyone that was online, and she'll just email it. You know, is that easier, Joanne, for you to just go in and take everybody's name that was here and then just automatically email them a certificate so that you don't get bombarded with emails?
Yeah, I can do that if
So
everyone
that's what we'll do. So anyone online won't have to do anything. But remembering Joanne works 2 days a week and has other job duties, so this may not happen next week. So within the next month, you should be getting a certificate if you were online today. Anyone who's looking at it after the fact, it would be an unverifiable, so they can claim it if they're doing it on demand, but it would be just an unverified credit.
And it's 2 credits if you stay
Yeah.
for the education and
Yeah.
the AGM.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep an eye on your email. Awesome. Okay, I guess we're calling this to an end. Thank you everyone for your participation. Yeah, the questions are appreciated. Hope everyone has a lovely weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Maybe in person someday.
I will be ending the meeting for everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.